Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to this session. It's an interesting one which is based on Keeladi, an excavation site which has been in controversy quite a lot. And from Keeladi, there's one very interesting conclusion which is coming through, that is it time to revise our history and its timelines? And more than that, what is the current controversy? What are the implications of this? And what is the static portion? You cannot understand this topic if you don't understand why is that 800 BCE so very important in this story. So we'll try to understand this topic. We'll try to understand how there has always been a tussle between North and South and its history in that regard. And there's a certain bias which has been towards British history, more than that towards Northern history, and how the timeline itself also indicates that. And we'll talk about megalithic period, we'll talk about Sangam age, we'll talk about these things, we'll try to understand the dynamism and how this has also been politicized to a point. So before we do that, remember that the 19999 plus 12 months offer is live right now, and you have to use the code IAS English to be attributed to our team. Do use this code, because if you don't, you will not be attributed to the English team. Thereafter, the PPT for this session and anything related to history, just scan this QR code. You will be updated with everything in that regard. Now, this site has been at the epicenter of a tussle which has now gone on for more than a decade. Since 2014, when this site was found because of certain potsherds of a red and blackware pottery, and thereafter multiple other artifacts which were found on a coconut farm, Keeladi has become very, very important in the larger scheme of things. Now, there's a backstory here. Let me bring you up to speed up to that point, because even the high courts were involved in that. And then we'll talk about the implication. So, the Keeladi village or the Keezadi village is in the Tamil Nadu state, 12 kilometers from Madurai itself. It is on the river Vagai, and Vagai is in itself becoming a very important civilizational understanding. We are now developing something called the Vagai Valley civilization. And therein, Vagai River is becoming important in the larger scheme of things. We'll talk about that, what is the implication. Now, because this village had in the Shivaganga district produced a lot of different artifacts, the first question came that should we excavate it or not? Therein, in 2014, the ASI gave the green light for the excavations in the Shivaganga district in Keeladi. And since then, a lot of artifacts related to the Sangam age were produced out of this site. However, the volume of these artifacts and the dating of these artifacts were very interesting and were indicating a pre-Sangam age era and pre-Sangam age period. That is where in 2017 somehow, the main archaeologist who is involved in the excavation from the Tamil Nadu government, which is Ramakrishna, he was transferred to Assam. And it is believed that because there was a lot of uneasy documentation, uneasy artifacts being produced, which would have in a way changed the timeline of history itself as it is taught and told to you through the NCERTs, they said lack of significant finding is the problem. Thereafter, the Tamil Nadu state moved towards Madras High Court, saying that the archaeological department has been a part of a larger political conspiracy and the excavator should not be removed. And that is where the digging was resumed once the Madras High Court said that it should. Thereafter, close to 13,000 artifacts have been unearthed and have been pushed into what is called as the Keeladi Museum now. And therein, there is a new concept that Keeladi or Keezadi is now a part of what is called as the Vagai Valley civilization. And Vagai Valley civilization, the VVC as we are calling it, is now turning out to be a very important urban site at which Keeladi is at the center. Now, in this, there are 3 to 4 things which have been asserted. First, the site is urban. Second, it is showing water management. It is showing step wells. It is showing wells. It is showing water reservoirs. It is showing sewage and drainage systems. a lot of features which we attribute to the IBC for first urbanization. And if I go further, I also find old Tamil script in certain potsherds. And thereafter, we have also found evidence of trade through agate and carnelian beads, which are not found in that area but were brought in. Further, we have found recreational games, which tells you that there is an urban civilization with urban lifestyle. It has also yielded a lot of evidence for industrial activities, which is there were multiple bead making, seal making, and other forms of industrial activities which were being done. Then we have also found artifacts which are made of iron, which indicates that iron technology had been properly, in a way, refined and developed in Keeladi before it became such an important site. But what is even more interesting is we have found potsherds which give us indication that they were trading with the Indus Valley civilization, because Indus Valley civilization pottery has also been found in Keeladi. Now this is now a little bit unnerving for a person who would want to propagate the idea that the southern states, the southern history has inherited most of its concept from what is called as the northern timeline in that regard. I'll talk about the timeline, but there is a certain argument which is pushed. There's certain, you can say, picture which is there, which is that southern history follows the northern history. North Indian history is the one which sets the parameter, be it the Chalcolithic age, be it the Iron Age, and then South India inherited it through its transfer. What this does is, this basically breaks the timeline into two and rather argues that there is a parallel civilization, urban and very, very advanced, vis-a-vis something where we had a regression in the Vedic age. We'll talk about that. Now, what is the reason why we're discussing this and what is the most present context is this. 2 years after the archaeologist had submitted his report, 982 pages report, now the ASI has asked that you need to make corrections into the report to make it more authentic. The problem which they have is with the fact that it says 8th century BC as the starting point of the Keeladi civilization. Therein, the archaeologist himself, A. Ramakrishna, has argued that it is very foundationally sound. He has said that this date over which you have a problem, which is 8th to 5th century BCE, has been found through stratigraphic study, which is stratigraphic study means when you go as per the layers of the soil itself. And he's also said that it has been also authenticated through AMS. AMS is a very interesting concept. See, you have radiocarbon dating or carbon dating, but a better version of that is spectrometry. So AMS is actually spectrometry, a better version of carbon dating. And he's saying that through this spectrometry, we have been able to ascertain that the date goes to 8th century BCE, 800 to 700 BC. Now, the question is very simple. Why does this in turn lead to even the Union Culture Minister getting involved, the ASI getting involved, debunking, asking him to revise his whole study itself? And that is where this 800 BCE for Keeladi is going to break the timeline and make us also revise the larger concepts which are taught within NCERTs and within popular history. Do understand one thing, in academic history, there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of revision which has already happened. In what is called as NCERT based, UPSC based, popular imagination, there is an understanding which is that South follows the North when it comes to technological development. This site breaks that. Now, in order to understand this 800 BC, let's try to understand the timeline. This is something which I would have taught you or going to teach you when we will discuss ancient medieval art and culture in class. But see, there is no controversy with regards to this period, which is the Paleo, the Mesolithic, Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic. This more or less from 2.5 million years ago till 4000 BCE is more or less accepted. This will change according to the source you're referring to. because from BP to BC the changes is different. Thereafter, you are automatically told and argued that you have what is called as the Chalcolithic period, and the Chalcolithic period in Indian history is represented by the non-Harappan Chalcolithic plus the IVC, the Indus Valley Civilization, which is the Bronze Age. This is the gold standard of civilizations, a very modern civilization in that regard. This is a Bronze Age civilization. And the period for this is mostly given to be 2600 to 1700 BCE as the mature phase. And IVC goes back to 3200 also. But the idea is very simple, that this is where civilizational understanding, modern civilization starts. And till this point, the story is also not bifurcated. It is only kept, there is no north and south. It's just Indian subcontinent in that regard. This has also been now challenged from multiple resources and multiple sites which are coming from South India. From South India, we have now found megalithic sites which are yielding iron, which can be dated back to 3343 BC, which would be putting them before the IVC also. So that is a separate controversy altogether. We are talking about Keeladi right now, but there is also a lot of new research which is happening, which is arguing that the megalithic sites of South India are actually yielding iron at 3343 BCE. And this is something where a lot of, again, research is going on, lot of controversies there, but we'll talk about this maybe in a separate video altogether. But megalithic sites from South India are yielding iron, which would lead to the IVC to become secondary and the megalithic to become the first, and iron to develop first in South, then in North, which again is more about politics and egos rather than the concept of what is called as the nuanced form. This is very well accepted within academic history that megalithic sites can go back to the 4th millennium BCE also, but within popular imagination, what is taught to you through the NCERT, that is something which is not established in that regard. So this is something which we'll maybe separately talk about, but the idea is there is a lot of challenge to the idea that Iron Age only develops with Vedic Age in India also. There's a lot of controversy there also. Multiple sites in Tamil Nadu from the megalithic period giving us evidence of that. If you know any of those sites, do mention in the comment section. Now, from this point forward, history gets bifurcated. One into the North Indian timeline, the other one into the South Indian timeline. So if I further simplify this for you, from Paleolithic, Mesolithic and Neolithic till IVC and non-Harappan, there is no real problem as of right now, though should also be revised in that regard. From here on, things become very interesting because we have two timelines. The first timeline argues that in North India, you will have the Vedic Age, then you will have the Mahajanpadas, then you will have the Mauryas, the post-Mauryas, and the story of ancient India in North India ends with Gupta, which in turn leads to early medieval. The time period, you would know, close to 1500 to 1000 to 600, and Mahajanpada is 6th century BCE to 324, 321 according to source BCE. This is 321 or 324 BCE to 184 BCE. Post-Maurya starts from 185 BCE and goes on till 300 CE. And Gupta would be 300 CE to more or less 600 CE. And wherein lies the understanding is that South India, we have megalithic, which is placed to be between 2000 to 300 BCE, which is 2nd millennium to 3rd century or 3rd or 2nd century. And then we have something called the Sangam Age. a term which is used for 300 BCE to 300 CE. One of the postmodern dynasties is Satavahanas, which is in the Deccan. But from Sangam onwards, you start to see a conversion that even the Mauryan edicts talk about the Chera Cholas of the Pandyas. And therefore, Sangam will be followed by Satavahanas. And Satavahanas will then be followed by the last major power, which is the Vaka Takas. And this is where things have become a little bit more interesting. Because if you look at this, what Keeladi is doing is, it is giving us evidence of Sangam age also, because it is giving a scriptural reference to Old Tamil. Further, it is also giving us evidence of trade, that too with the IVC, and IVC pottery has been found. It is giving us all indications of being a very, very well-developed site. Even agricultural, you can say, land has been found, which is dating close to 3000 BCE in the same site, meaning that it was also a Neolithic site in that regard. But why that report needs to be revised is because it is placing Keeladi at 800. Now, if it places Keeladi at 800 BCE, then this is going to become a problem. See, 600 is here, 600 is here, therefore Keeladi falls somewhere here. And if Keeladi falls somewhere here in 800 BCE, it would then challenge the Vedic civilization. The Rig Vedic is, or early Vedic is 1500 to 1000. And 1000 to 600 is the period of later Vedic. Now, it is believed that iron properly was used in North India first in the period of what is called as later Vedic, though known in the early Vedic period also. Megalithic sites have already broken that notion that iron has to come after copper itself. Very well-known concept in that regard. But the idea that this timeline is secondary to this one. This is the glorious timeline. This is the straightforward timeline. And the secondary timeline tends to learn, which is that South learned Varna system, South learned the concept of caste system, South learned iron technology, South learned the concept of smelting. They learned things. This is where there is a certain subordination which is given to this timeline only in popular imagination. Please do note this point. Within academic history, within academic circles, which I have been a part of, there was no subordination. I've been taught by very, very well-known southern historians, Keshwan Veluthar, Tusi Champaka Lakshmi, very well-known personalities, and there's no north-south divide in that. It is just that within popular imagination, this timeline is given more importance and is seen to be the master timeline, out of which the southern timeline learns. The Vagai Valley civilization, what it does is, it rather challenges that after IVC, there was no urbanization, it was only second urbanization which is here. Rather, if IVC is first urbanization, then Keeladi is second urbanization. Then this should be third urbanization. Because there was an urban civilization which was already there in South India and independent of all the developments of North India. This is a very important point which has been pushed. There is a certain concept where we give this southern history and insularity, we are pushing it away. We tend to say that everything has to come from the Deccan sector, from the northern sector. What Keeladi and all these sites in Tamil Nadu are proving, and without bringing in controversy or without bringing in politics, is that be it iron technology, be it bronze technology, be it copper technology, be it urbanization, be it using pipes, using the concept of drainage patterns, be it trade, everything was developing in this timeline parallelly in a more sophisticated way. So this controversy, if you really want to understand and appreciate it and you really want to become a part of it, you have to understand how this 8th century BC actually totally destroys the timeline. And therefore, the idea that there's a generic progression in which there's a standard progression in North and South will be challenged. Because then what happens is Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, then IVC, and then the Vagai Valley civilization will come. Thereafter, we would say that megalithic also existed, and is there something called megalithic or not is now under question. Is megalithic an extension or was before the Vagai Valley civilization? And is Vedic period or are the Aryans, quote unquote, learning from the Vagai Valley or from Keeladi in that regard? And that is where things become interesting. I am not going to speculate. I am not the one who is going to say that you now need to change the timeline. But see, the idea is that with so many things happening and with so much good reports, and it's not that a report is not sound. AMS is a very, very well known and very reliable technology to do carbon dating. If we have such forms of understandings, we should also have the strength, the courage as a civilization, the Indian civilization, unity in diversity, to also question the timeline. That is what the process is doing. We should be revising. I would say that we should even add that 3343, that multiple references which are coming from megalithic sites which are producing iron technology in that regard. We should be complicating this. This is, in a way, you should also understand this point, this is a British concept, which is that the British created the initial history of India. They rediscovered the history of India. They put this timeline into place. And this is where there may be a need to change our timeline. I'm not saying that it should be done immediately. I'm not saying that it should be done without scientific and proof, without not taking into account interpolation, without not taking into account exaggeration. We have to collate, we have to corroborate. It is a historian's task to do it. And as a historian, I'm telling you that these are things which have been already complicated within the academic circles. It is just that in popular imagination, when politicians will talk about timelines and history, they will always add a layer of politics to it. So there is and there should be a revision. There is and there's a need to further add more layering and nuance to this story. As a UPSC aspirant, how does this affect you? You should know the site, you should know the river, you should know where it is, you should know what period it is actually referring to. Now, thereafter, all of this may be a mains level question can be expected. Please do not distort your understanding which is coming from the NCERT, because the paper, quote unquote, again, the UPSC does not say that it uses the NCERT per se, but what standard books are going to talk about, you have to be within that. If there's a revision in the NCERT or in any other form of textbook which is relevant for UPSC, then I will come and tell you that we should. I'm telling you this already. There's a certain 800 BCE is a little bit, you can say, anxiety producing for the master timeline, for the idea that North has always given something to the South. The South has always inherited technology, inherited concepts in that sense. So before I end this session, I just want to tell you this. It's an interesting development. It's controversial because the whole idea that it has to be revised, the ASI coming through, the union minister coming through, the idea that there is a lot of, you can say, acceptance within the academic circle about this report being very authentic. Therefore, there's a lot of politics happening over history. The only use of history today is to misuse it or to, in a way, make it something which gives you votes. But the idea is this is very genuine. The report is genuine. The idea is also very genuine. How to change it is where there needs to be a little bit of consensus, a little bit of understanding. Is it time to revise our history? It has always been that, because the British have written our history first. As a revisionist historian myself, we as revisionist historians have been doing this for modern India. We've been doing it for medieval India. And it is high time that we do it for ancient India also. Historians have been doing it. It is just that it was happening within closed circles, within closed doors. Maybe it is time to bring in everyone to have consensus. And we as Indians should know and should be cognizant of the fact that it is not that just the IVC was a very urban civilization. Even Keeladi and the sites, close to 250 plus sites, all exhibiting the same type of understanding, which represent this river-based civilization, should also be highlighted. India is both North and South together, and therefore its history also has to take into account how these two regions interact with one another. Thank you, take care, and I hope that you found this session useful. Bye-bye.